Dorian Pierce leaned against the hood of his sleek black Aston Martin, staring up at the sky like it had answers he hadn't found anywhere else, not in boardrooms, luxury hotels, or the penthouse that overlooked half the city. For the first time in months, he was somewhere no one expected to see him. A public park. No security. No tailored suit. Just jeans, a hoodie, and an old pair of sneakers he barely remembered owning. The moment he stepped out of the car, he felt free. No cameras. No investors. Just the stars. He didn't come here for anyone. He came because he needed to breathe, really breathe. His father had passed 6 weeks ago, leaving behind a tangled mess of expectations, guilt, and an empire Dorian never asked to inherit. Now he was worth over $80 million on paper, and he'd never felt more alone. He shoved his hands into his pockets, walking toward a clearing where a few people had gathered with blankets, thermoses, and telescopes. It was a stargazing night, something the local astronomy club had organized. He'd found it randomly online earlier that day and decided to show up. No one recognized him. That was the point. He found an empty bench near the edge of the field and sat down, the cool air brushing against his skin. A few steps to his right, someone adjusted a tripod, muttering under their breath. Then she walked into view. She was wrapped in a gray cardigan, her dark hair pulled up messily like she didn't care what anyone thought. She had a foldable chair in one hand and a thermos in the other, and as she sat up, she dropped her bag, spilling out a notebook, a flashlight, and a protein bar. Seriously, she muttered, crouching down to gather her things. Dorian stood before he could think. Here, he said, picking up her flashlight. She glanced up, startled. Her eyes met his. Warm brown. Sharp. Cautious. Thanks, she said warily, taking it from him. Didn't think anyone else would be nice enough to help around here. I'm not from around here, he said. She tilted her head slightly. Tourist? Something like that. She gave him a once-over, then smiled. Well, mystery man, if you're going to hover, you might as well make yourself useful. He blinked. How? You know how to work a telescope? Only the ones that come with instruction manuals. She laughed, and it was so sudden and real that it hit him in the chest. Good enough. She gestured to the chair next to hers. You can sit. I won't bite. He took the seat. I'm Vienna Clarke, she said, extending her hand like they were old friends. He hesitated for a second. Dorian. Just Dorian? For now. She didn't press. Instead, she poured some hot chocolate from her thermos and handed him a cup. You look like you need this more than I do. He accepted it. Thanks. They sat in silence for a while, sipping hot chocolate and staring up at the sky. See that? She asked, pointing. That's Jupiter. You can tell by the brightness and position. You're into this stuff? I work at the planetarium part-time. Mostly do lectures for kids. It doesn't pay much, but it makes me happy. She shrugged. What about you? What do you do? He looked up at the stars. I build things. She raised an eyebrow. Like houses? No, he said. Companies. She tilted her head. You a tech guy? Something like that. I run a few businesses. My dad used to. He stopped, then shook his head. It's complicated. Vienna didn't push. Everyone's got something complicated, she said softly. They talked for over an hour about stars, childhood dreams, and what it meant to feel completely lost. She was smart. Real. She didn't try to impress him or flirt. She just talked. And he couldn't look away. When the event ended and people started packing up, Vienna stood and stretched. Well, Dorian, it was nice meeting you. Thanks for not being a creep. He laughed. You're welcome. She smiled and turned to leave. He stood too fast. Wait. She paused. Do you want to grab a coffee sometime? She blinked. You don't even know my last name. Clarke, he said. You told me. She narrowed her eyes. Right? And you're just Dorian. He hesitated. Pierce. Dorian Pierce. Her brows lifted slightly. Like Pierce Holdings. He froze. Oh my God, she said, eyes wide. You're that Dorian Pierce? He shoved a hand through his hair. Yeah. Look, I didn't mean to. No, it's fine. I just wow. You're a millionaire. He winced. That's not exactly the headline I go for. Vienna laughed again, shaking her head. This is wild. I almost didn't come tonight. Same. She looked at him, something soft settling in her eyes. Okay. Coffee. His chest loosened. Yeah. But not in a boardroom, she said. I picked the place. You show up like a normal person. Deal. She scribbled her number on a scrap of paper, handed it to him, and walked away, disappearing into the night with her chair and thermos like she hadn't just turned his entire night upside down. Dorian stared at the paper in his hand. He'd come to the park to escape. He never guessed a stranger there would be his love. The coffee shop Vienna chose was tucked into the side of a narrow street lined with old brick buildings and rain-dampened cobblestones. It didn't have a name out front, only a hand-painted sign with a steaming mug and a chipped bell that rang when Dorian pushed through the door. He was 15 minutes early. Old habits. He picked the window booth like she'd asked in her message and waited, fingers tapping lightly against the ceramic saucer of his untouched espresso. The place was small, cozy, and smelled like cinnamon and roasted beans. No one looked up when he walked in. No one cared who he was. That anonymity, once suffocating, now felt like a blessing. When Vienna arrived, she didn't wave or shout his name. She just walked straight to the booth, slid across from him, and set down a knit beanie that had half unraveled on one side. You beat me here, she said, pulling off her coat and shaking the rain from her sleeves. I make a habit of being early. I make a habit of sprinting through life and still being late. She glanced at the untouched cup. You don't like espresso? I was waiting. For me. Her brows lifted slightly. For the conversation. She blinked, then gave a slow nod. All right, Pierce. Let's talk. They ordered her a chai latte with almond milk and a slice of banana bread. Him nothing more. He wasn't hungry, not in the way she was. Her appetite was full of curiosity, not food. So, she said, settling in, tell me something that's not in a press release. Dorian leaned back, brow arching. You Googled me. I'm not a saint. He folded his arms. Fine. I used to draw floor plans for imaginary cities when I was a kid. Entire skylines. I'd name the buildings after Greek gods. Vienna leaned in. Seriously. I still have some of them, buried in my mother's old boxes. She nodded slowly. Okay, that's solid. Your turn. You live alone? I do, she said. Well, unless you count a dying fern and a neighbor who thinks quiet hours are a conspiracy. He laughed once, surprised. What do you actually want out of your life? Vienna looked him dead in the eye. To not end up like my parents. He didn't ask more. She didn't offer more. There was a silence that sat between them, comfortable, not empty. You work too much, she said, changing the subject. I can tell. Is that a crime? It is when it becomes your entire personality. He tilted his head. And yours is what? Aspiring telescope whisperer? She leaned forward, her eyes dancing. I'd rather be passionate about something than numb to everything. That hit him harder than he expected. After coffee, they walked. Rain had softened to a drizzle and the street lamps flickered behind droplets like amber stars. Vienna walked with her hands buried in her coat pockets, shoulders hunched against the cold. I can't tell if you're trying to impress me or scare me off, she said. Both, maybe? She stopped walking. Why me? Dorian paused, the wind nudging at his collar. You didn't look at me like I was a number. Vienna studied him for a long beat. You're not. I know that now. She exhaled and her breath rose like smoke. So what are you planning to do about it? He didn't answer immediately. His phone buzzed in his pocket, probably someone from the office, or worse, his mother's lawyer. He ignored it. I want to see you again, he said, quietly, seriously. Vienna tilted her head. And when things get complicated? They already are. She gave a small nod, then turned and walked again. Then you better not disappear when it gets worse. They met up twice more that week. Once at a bookstore where she showed him her favorite poetry collection, dog-eared and scribbled with notes. The other time at a rooftop greenhouse she volunteered at on Thursdays. She laughed when he nearly knocked over a pot of lavender. By the fourth day, he was waiting outside her building in a black car he hadn't driven in over a year. She opened the door and looked at the leather interior like it might bite her. "This is subtle," she said, raising an eyebrow. "I wanted to show you something." "You gonna tell me where?" "No." She slid in without another word. They drove in silence for a while. The city thinned, buildings giving way to trees and open stretches of road. Eventually, the car pulled into a gated estate on a hill, the kind of place with gates higher than the average house and a driveway lined with lanterns. Vienna stared out the window. "Is this your house?" "No," his voice was quiet. "It was my father's." She turned toward him. "Why are we here?" Dorian stepped out without answering. She followed. They walked past the main house and down a stone path that led to a glass dome nestled in the garden. Inside, the air was warm and sweet, filled with flowering vines and soft light. "Right after my father died, I found this place again," he said. "He built it for my mother. She used to come here to read." Vienna stepped inside, her breath catching. "It's beautiful. I haven't brought anyone here. Not since he cut himself off." She didn't press. Her fingers trailed along a hanging orchid, delicate and purple. "I didn't know if it was okay to want something different," he said, voice low. "Something not carved from legacy or expectation." Vienna turned to him. "You're allowed to want peace. I think I want you more." She didn't move. "That's dangerous." "I've done dangerous before," he said. "This feels necessary." Her eyes searched his for a long moment. "Then you better be sure." "I am." They stayed in the dome until the sun dipped low. He didn't kiss her then. He just stood beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her shoulder brush his. When they finally drove back into the city, neither spoke. But something had shifted quietly, irrevocably. 3 days later, he was at his office reviewing contracts he barely cared to finish when his assistant stepped into the room. "There's someone here to see you." "I don't take drop-ins." "She said you'd want to hear this." He rubbed his eyes. "Who is it?" She didn't give a name. "Just this." She handed him a folded note. It was written in a rushed scrawl. "I didn't want to believe it, but I saw it with my own eyes." And stapled to the back was a photograph. Vienna, in a restaurant, sitting across from a man Dorian hadn't seen in 10 years, his estranged cousin, Ellis. The same cousin who tried to steal a family contract and vanished after being disinherited. The same cousin who had every reason to want revenge. His stomach dropped. He stood so quickly the chair scraped behind him. "Clear my schedule." His assistant blinked. "Sir." Now, as he strode out of the office, one thought echoed louder than the rest. Had Vienna known who he was all along? Or worse, had she been sent to find him? And if so, why did it hurt this much to think she'd lied? Vienna didn't answer the first time he knocked. Dorian stood outside her third-floor walk-up, rain soaking the collar of his coat, the photograph burning a hole in his pocket. He knocked again, harder this time, until the sound of movement echoed behind the door. When it creaked open, Vienna's eyes were shadowed in confusion. "You didn't call. I needed to see you." She stepped aside slowly, her expression unreadable. The second the door shut behind him, he pulled the photo from his coat and held it out. Her gaze dropped. Her face didn't change. Not one flicker. Dorian's jaw tightened. "That's Ellis. My cousin. I know who he is." "You were with him." "Yes." "When?" 3 days ago. He found me outside my apartment." His fingers curled around the edge of the photo. "You didn't tell me. I didn't think I needed permission to speak to someone." He took a step closer, voice low. "He's not just someone. He tried to dismantle my father's company from the inside. He stole from us. He's been gone for years. And now he shows up again talking to you." Vienna's arms folded tightly across her chest. "I didn't invite him. He said we'd met before years ago at one of the lectures I gave. I didn't remember him until he started talking. About me. About your family. About what happened between you." Dorian's breath caught. "And you listened." "I did." "Why?" "Because I wanted to know what you weren't telling me." His chest rose sharply. "You think I'm hiding something?" I think you're trying not to break apart. Silence fell. The kind that feels too loud. Vienna stepped around him and walked to the kitchen, grabbing a glass of water with hands that didn't shake. I didn't tell you about the meeting because I wasn't sure what it meant. I still don't know. But I didn't come into your life because of him. I came to that park because I needed a moment to breathe. You expect me to believe that's all it was? Her eyes met his, steady and unwavering. Yes. Because it's the truth. Dorian's shoulders tensed, his voice quieter now. He wants something. He always did. Then maybe you should ask yourself what he thinks you still owe him. His lips parted, but no words came. Vienna didn't wait. You think I betrayed you? That I'm some plant here to stir up your past? If that's what you believe, then this ends now. I don't want it to end. Then start trusting me. He looked down at the photograph still clenched in his hand. The image blurred before he folded it in half and tucked it back into his coat. I'll deal with him. But if he contacts you again, I'll tell you, she said firmly. But you need to stop looking at me like I'm going to disappear. Dorian's expression softened, the lines of anger fading into something else. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Vienna placed the glass on the counter. Neither do I. But I keep showing up. He took another step toward her. I came here ready to accuse you of everything. And now I want to take you somewhere. She frowned. Where? You'll see. They didn't speak again until he pulled the car into an underground garage beneath a 20-story building. When they stepped out, the elevator had no buttons, just a keycard slot. He slid one in and the doors closed silently. Vienna glanced around the mirrored walls. You live here? No. When the doors opened, they were greeted by soft lighting and a glass corridor lined with towering bookshelves. At the end of the hallway stood double doors made of walnut and brass. He unlocked them and stepped aside. She entered slowly. It wasn't a home. It was a private observatory. The rooftop had been converted into a transparent dome, housing 2 massive telescopes, an oval skylight, and a curved leather lounge facing the stars. Every inch of the space was designed with painstaking detail, sleek, quiet, and reverent. Vienna's breath caught audibly. This is my mother's. Her eyes widened. She was into astronomy? She taught me everything I knew before the world taught me to forget it. Vienna walked forward, fingertips brushing the edge of a telescope. Why are you showing me this? Because you're the only person who'd understand what it cost me to build it back up again. She turned toward him slowly. You built this. After she died. I didn't want anyone else touching it. Vienna stepped closer to the skylight and looked up. You never mentioned her. I don't talk about her. Why? Because she didn't belong in the world my father built. And neither do I. She met his gaze. You think I do? I think you make it bearable. Something shifted between them. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides, his hand brushing her wrist before curling firmly around it. She didn't pull away. I thought I needed distance to protect what matters to me, he said. But all it did was keep me from the one person who actually sees me. Vienna's voice was barely above a whisper. Then don't run. He leaned in, forehead resting against hers. I'm not going anywhere. The kiss came slow, deliberate. No hesitation. No pretense. Just the quiet collision of 2 people who had stopped pretending they didn't need something real. When it broke, she didn't speak. She just leaned into him, letting the silence wrap around them like a second skin. Later, while the night stretched outside the dome and the city blinked sleepily below, they lay on the lounge, side by side, staring up at the stars. Vienna spoke first. What does Ellis want? Control. Legacy. He thinks I'm squandering it. Are you? Dorian closed his eyes. I don't care about the empire. I care about building something that doesn't destroy people. Vienna turned her head. Then start by not letting him tear you apart. I don't know how to stop him. She reached for his hand. Then don't do it alone. It was the first time in years he'd felt lighter. Not triumphant. Not certain. But like there was something ahead of him that wasn't already set in stone. The next morning, Vienna woke to a knock at her door. She expected Dorian. Instead, it was someone else. A woman, tall, sharply dressed, with hair pulled into a tight knot and a clipboard in hand. Vienna opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you?" The woman gave a tight smile. "You've been named in a pending investigation involving estate interference and securities fraud." Vienna's stomach dropped. "Excuse me. My client has reason to believe you were approached with the intent to manipulate Mr. Dorian Pierce." Vienna's throat tightened. "Who's your client?" The woman handed her a card. "My name is Cassandra Wren. I represent Ellis Pierce." Vienna stared at the card, her pulse thundering in her ears. "Don't worry," Cassandra added. "No one's pressing charges. Yet." And just like that, she turned and left. Vienna stood frozen in the doorway, the card clenched between her fingers. Ellis wasn't just trying to destroy Dorian. He was coming for her, too. Vienna stood in the middle of her apartment like the air had been sucked out of the room. Cassandra's business card was still in her hand. The edges curled from how tightly she was gripping it. Her phone sat untouched on the counter, but she didn't reach for it. She couldn't, not yet. She needed to think. Ellis wasn't just dredging up family wounds anymore. He was moving like a man with a plan, and she had just been dropped into the middle of it. Whether she'd agreed or not didn't seem to matter. Her name was now attached to something dark and calculated, and she wasn't naive enough to think it would disappear on its own. She wasn't afraid of Dorian. She was afraid of what this would do to him. She didn't sleep that night. By morning, Vienna was dressed and at the front entrance of Pierce headquarters before sunrise. The security guard gave her a skeptical look when she asked to be let up without an appointment. "He's not in yet," the man said. "Then I'll wait." "You can't just." "I'm not leaving." Eventually, someone must have called ahead because a few minutes later, Dorian's assistant arrived and waved her through. She rode the elevator in silence, her hands buried in the pockets of her coat, eyes locked on the metal doors. When they opened, Dorian was already standing in his office, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He didn't turn around when she stepped in. "I know," he said. Vienna closed the door behind her. "She came to my apartment." His voice was quiet. "Cassandra works fast. She had paperwork, implications. She said I was named in something about estate interference." He finally turned, and the look in his eyes made her stomach twist. He wasn't angry. He looked like someone who had been bracing for this blow for years. "He's trying to drag you down because he can't reach me directly," Dorian said. "You're the easiest target. I didn't know you were that vulnerable." "I'm not. Not legally. But this isn't about law. It's about leverage." Vienna stepped closer. "Then let me help." "No." "Yes," she said sharply. "You brought me into this when you told me everything. I don't get to walk away just because it's messy now." Dorian's jaw flexed. "I won't let him use you." "Then don't let him isolate you either." He looked at her like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. "You're not responsible for the damage he caused," she said. "But if he's trying to use me to get to you, then I need to understand what he thinks he still has." Dorian moved to the desk, pulling open a drawer and retrieving a slim folder. He handed it to her without a word. Inside were documents, copies of old trust settlements, shareholder reports, and a sealed letter addressed with Ellis's name on the original envelope. "This letter," Dorian said, "was written by my father before everything fell apart. He offered Ellis a final chance to come clean, to return what he took. In exchange, he would have kept his shares." Vienna looked up. "He refused. He never responded. Disappeared. Until now." She set the folder down. "So he's back to claim what he walked away from. He thinks if he can prove I'm incompetent or corrupted, the board will reconsider his exclusion. And if he can't prove that, then he'll try to destroy my credibility. Or yours." Vienna straightened. "Then we stay ahead of him." Dorian watched her carefully. "You'd really fight him? Even if it means dragging your name through the press?" "I didn't come into your life to run when it got complicated." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he crossed the room and touched her face gently, his thumb brushing the edge of her cheekbone. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he whispered. You mean us? He nodded. Vienna gave a soft smile. Then maybe it was the only thing that ever made sense. Later that afternoon, Dorian called an emergency board meeting not to defend himself, but to announce that he was stepping back temporarily from the public side of his position. Not forever, just long enough to dismantle Ellis's leverage without risking the company's image. He named his CFO as interim spokesperson and made it clear that any accusations tied to Vienna were a fabrication. Vienna watched from the back of the room unnoticed by most of the board. But Dorian's eyes found hers more than once, and she could see the weight lifting, piece by piece. That evening, Dorian picked her up without warning. No more hiding, he said. They drove upstate past the last traces of city life through winding roads that bled into forest and sky. When they stopped, it was at a small clearing surrounded by towering pines, the same park where they first met. Only now it was empty. No astronomy club. No strangers. Just them. He stepped out and opened the trunk, revealing a blanket, a bottle of wine, and 2 camping chairs. You planned this? Vienna asked, startled. I needed to come full circle. They set up under the stars, the same constellations overhead that had watched them form, break, and rebuild whatever this was between them. As they sat side by side, glasses in hand, Dorian pulled something from his coat. A box. Small. Velvet. Vienna froze. He didn't open it right away. Just held it in his palm, turning it slowly as if it weighed more than it should. I don't believe in fate, he said. I believe in choice. But every time I had a reason to walk away, I chose you. She didn't breathe. I didn't expect that night in the park to mean anything. I was running from everything. But I found you. And somehow that made all of it, my past, the fights, the grief, worth it. He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple. Elegant. A single diamond nestled in a platinum band. Vienna blinked, stunned. I don't want this to be a grand performance, Dorian said. I just want it to be real. I want you. However this looks. Whatever it takes. Her voice was barely audible. You're serious? I've never been more. She looked at him for a long time, her heart thundering in her chest. And then, with no hesitation, she nodded. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit like it was made for her. They didn't kiss right away. They just sat, hands clasped, staring up at the sky that had started everything. The wedding came 3 months later. Small. Secluded. Held inside the glass dome observatory Dorian had rebuilt. The guest list was short, no board members. No press. Just people who mattered. Vienna wore a midnight blue dress, the color of the sky the night they met. Dorian wore a gray tailored suit. No tie. His eyes only for her. There were no speeches, no fanfare, just vows whispered under the stars. I never guessed that night would change my life, he said. But I'd live it 1,000 times again if it led me back to you. Vienna's eyes filled. You found me when I didn't even know I was lost. And you gave me something I never thought I'd have again, wonder. They kissed beneath the dome as the sky spun above them. And then, just the two of them, they danced. No music. No rhythm. Just hearts finally, completely in sync. Vienna pressed her palm to the glass dome of the observatory, the cool surface grounding her. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, dusting the city skyline in white. Inside, the warm glow of soft lights cast golden reflections across polished wood and silver telescopes. The space had become more than a sanctuary, it was now theirs. Together. Behind her, Dorian adjusted the collar of his shirt, still half-buttoned from the rushed dressing room downstairs. You're hiding, he said, voice low but edged with amusement. I'm thinking, she replied without turning around. He stepped beside her, eyes scanning the falling snow. Cold feet? She gave him a sideways glance. About the reception? Maybe. My aunt's already cornered the caterer twice. I meant about marrying me. Vienna turned fully toward him, the weight of the ring on her finger anchoring her. You keep asking that like you're expecting a different answer. I'm not expecting anything. I just still don't fully believe this is real. Well, she said, reaching for his hand, you did put a ring on it. In front of actual people. With legal witnesses. Dorian let out a quiet laugh, the kind he reserved for moments when his guard dropped entirely. I think I'm still waiting for the part where someone tells me I imagined it. She wrapped her arms around his waist. Then hold on to me until you're convinced. He kissed the top of her head and rested his chin there. Might take a while. Later, as guests trickled into the lower-level reception room, Vienna stayed back for a moment longer. She wasn't putting it off. She just wanted to remember the quiet, the stars above, the certainty in her chest. She found Dorian again after the speeches were over. He was at the edge of the room, speaking to a tall man with a close-cropped beard and a sharp blazer. When he saw her, he excused himself and crossed the room toward her. "That was Halston," he said. "Should I know who that is?" "He used to be my father's legal advisor. He's retired now, but he came out of the shadows after hearing what Ellis tried to do. Turns out, there's a clause in the trust that no one remembered." Vienna raised an eyebrow. "What kind of clause?" "Ellis was permanently disqualified from regaining any stake the moment he refused arbitration. It wasn't just exclusion. It was final." She blinked. "But then why would he come back?" "Because he didn't know. Or he thought he could still manipulate someone into giving him a backdoor through the board." "You mean me?" Dorian nodded. "But it's over. There's nothing left for him to claim." Halston filed official closure documents. "Even the board won't revisit it." Vienna exhaled slowly. "So that's it." He reached for her hand. "That's it." They left the reception early. No dramatic exit. Just a quiet ride back to their new home, a restored brownstone tucked on a quiet street near the river. Dorian had found it months prior, but hadn't said anything until the morning after she said yes. They'd renovated it together. Fought over tile patterns, debated bookshelves versus wall art, and painted the kitchen walls twice when the first color turned out too green. Now it felt lived in. The kind of place where mugs were left out and socks were forgotten on the stairs. The kind of place where love settled into the furniture. They curled up on the couch, Vienna's feet tucked under his thigh, her head on his shoulder. Outside, the snow had thickened, muting the city to a hush. "I never asked," she said suddenly. "What would you have done if I'd said no?" He looked down at her. "Are we really playing that game?" "I'm curious." He thought for a moment. "I think I would have waited. Not forever. But long enough to prove I wasn't giving up." Vienna traced small circles on his arm. "You think people can change that much?" "I think we can learn to tell the truth," he said. "Especially to ourselves." She nodded slowly. "You know, I used to think love was supposed to be complicated." "It is," he said. "But not in the way people think." "Then how?" "It's complicated because it requires honesty. And that's terrifying. But when it works, when it's real, it's the most peaceful thing in the world." Vienna leaned in and kissed him. "That's probably the most romantic thing you've ever said. And I haven't even started drinking yet." She laughed and pulled the blanket higher. "You're lucky you're cute." He rested his head against hers. "I know." 2 weeks later, when the snow was still piled high and the world had slowed to a crawl, Vienna sat in the lounge chair of the observatory, a mug of tea in her hand. Dorian was at the other end of the room, adjusting one of the telescopes with the kind of intense concentration that made his brow furrow and his lips press together. She watched him, quiet, content, until he looked over. "What?" he asked. "Nothing. You're staring." "Just wondering how I got this lucky." He crossed to her slowly and crouched in front of her. "You think this is luck?" "I do." He shook his head. "This was choice. Every day. Every moment I could have let fear win. Every second I could have guarded myself instead of trusting you. I chose you." She set the mug down and touched his face, her thumb brushing the edge of his jaw. "Then I'll keep choosing you too." He kissed her hand, then stood and offered his. "Come look. Saturn's visible tonight." She let him pull her up and they stood together, peering through the lens at the ringed planet that hung like a secret in the sky. Neither said anything. They didn't need to. They had found each other in the middle of chaos, two people both running from the wreckage of their pasts, only to discover that their peace wasn't in isolation but in choosing to stand still together. Later, in the quiet of their bed, Vienna turned to him. "Do you think we'll ever stop chasing stars?" "Not if I can help it," Dorian said. And she believed him. Because with him, every day felt like something new but deeply known. Something vast, yet close. Like the universe had finally stopped spinning just long enough to let them catch their breath. Years passed. The observatory expanded, new lenses, new equipment, new visitors who came for lectures and stayed for coffee and conversation. Vienna taught again, this time on her own terms. Children filled the dome with laughter and questions while Dorian stood quietly at the back, always watching, always proud. They traveled. Greece. Patagonia. A remote island in Norway where the auroras danced across the sky like brushstrokes. But they always came back to the brownstone, to the city they'd fallen in love in, to the dome where it all began. One spring afternoon, Vienna stood in the garden behind their home, her hands buried in soil, planting new lavender beside the old. Dorian came out holding a small box. "You're not proposing again, are you?" she teased. "Not unless you say yes to this." She opened the box. Inside was a handwritten note and a key. She read the note, then stared at him, speechless. He shrugged. "It's not a big place. But it's by the edge of the lake. You said once you wanted to write somewhere quiet." Vienna blinked fast, trying to absorb it. "You bought us a cabin?" "I bought you one," he said, brushing dirt off her cheek. "But I'll visit. Often." She launched herself at him, arms around his neck, laughter and tears mingling in her voice. They kissed in the garden, surrounded by blooming lilacs and the scent of earth and promise. Dorian pulled back just enough to look at her. "Still think this is luck?" She shook her head. "No. Just love. The real kind." And it was. Every single day.